Yes, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner, joining you guys for a solo daily drop today. And what else would we be talking about besides Carolina basketball? The Tar Heels season started last night, ended in a 90-76 win over Elon in the Smith Center. And man, has the overreaction on social media and on some message boards, I'm not going to say all message boards, but in some areas on some message boards, been a little bit wild to see. Now, I'll start with this. Me and AJ have talked about this a lot. Carolina basketball, completely different animal in a lot of ways than Carolina football. We've talked about how Carolina basketball fans have been rewarded over the years. So there is a real kind of live and die by every moment, every game attitude that comes along with being a North Carolina basketball fan. It just doesn't really compare to football in that way because you haven't been rewarded. Don't need to rehash that, but that's kind of the summary and the gist of why people get so invested in North Carolina basketball, whether it's an exhibition game against Memphis or Johnson C. Smith or the season opener against Elon. People care and people want to talk and analyze and have their opinions on it, which is perfectly fine. And it's one of the reasons that makes covering a program like North Carolina so fun and interesting to do. Now, I say that to kind of move on to the next point in the gist of this drop, which is to help maybe back some of you guys off the ledge a little bit, calm it down a little bit, and realize and offer a little bit of perspective of where this team's at, where it still needs to go, and why overreacting over one game, especially a season opener with this team in particular, isn't really going to do you much good. And quite frankly, it's just not necessary at all. Now, let's dive into the numbers real quick from the game before we dive into reasons not to overreact about this one. Again, 90-76 win over Elon. This game was tied. Heck, Elon even took a lead late in the second half before I tweeted it out last night after the game, but it kind of just felt like RJ Davis checked into the game, decided he wasn't losing this one, and completely took over. He was absolutely fantastic down the stretch, finished with a game high 24.7 and 19 from the floor, just 311 from three. Carolina did shoot 40% from the 3-point line. So not a bad shooting night from beyond the arc, especially if RJ Davis maybe hits a couple more. We're having a little bit different conversation probably about how this game ultimately ended up going down, but 7 rebounds, 7 assists, big time game from him. It's what you expect. But I think a lot of the overreaction is coming from step one. I think it's the front court play. And I can understand that. I get why some people are maybe a little bit concerned about the front court even before these games have taken place. When I say these games, I'm talking about the exhibitions too, because we've talked about in some of our shows and some of our drops that there's been overreaction from those as well. So I think this is not just this is the first game, let's overreact because we almost, because Carolina almost lost to Elon. I don't think that's really the situation here. I think it's a couple of games combined, especially the Memphis game, and especially, I won't say especially, but a little bit of the Johnson C. Smith game as well. So front court, Jalen Washington, 8 points, 4 rebounds, didn't have a massive night by any means, didn't even score to the second half. He was +7 on the night. But again, you're going to need more from him, especially this Friday when Carolina goes to Kansas, which is going to be a game, a really tough game for Carolina, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in this one. Jalen Withers got the start at the 4 spot, 10-10. I mean, if you're getting that from Jalen Withers, I don't think anybody's going to be upset about it. Shot 4 for 10 from the floor, 2 for 3 from 3. So he hit a couple threes as well. Didn't go to the free throw line. I think if you're playing that position, you want to get to the free throw line more than obviously 0. And neither did Jalen Washington. That right there is a little bit of a concern. Those guys banging down low, grabbing rebounds, posting guys up. They should be going to the free throw line. You can't be combined 0 for 0 from the free throw line with those two guys. So I get maybe where some of the concern is coming there. If you want to even throw Cade Tyson in the mix as well, slow start from him, 2 points, 1 for 6 from the floor, 0 for 3 from 3-point land, grabbed just 2 boards, and then Vin Allen Lubin as well, 17 minutes, 4.7 rebounds. So not a ton of production out of the front court. You can understand why some people are maybe concerned about that. I get it, and I don't blame you in some reasons. But here's why you shouldn't be overreacting about it. It's game one, first and foremost. Everything that I'm going to point out in this podcast, the number one reason you shouldn't be overreacting to any of them is because it's game one, guys. It's the first game of the year. It's November. The game was on November 4th. What are we overreacting about? It's one game. And I know people say, like I've mentioned earlier, oh, the Memphis game, we saw some signs there, and Johnson C. Smith, they weren't. This is the first regular season game of the year. So keep that in mind with everything I point out here. Most importantly, though, what you got to realize with this team as a whole is there's going to be growing pains. There is. And it's really easy and evident why there's going to be growing pains with the team as a whole, but it's very easy to point out with the front court. You got Jalen Washington, who hasn't been a starter at North Carolina. Armando Bacot was there forever, it felt like. He was the 5 guy. He was the guy for Carolina ever since he came in as a freshman. And now someone's going to have to step up and replace him. Jalen Washington has a different set of skills than Armando Bacot as well. I think his game overall fits what Hubert Davis is trying to ultimately do, but it's going to take some time to see that develop, guys. I mean, he's going into a new role and a new environment and a team where he's going to be relied on a lot more than he ever has been before at North Carolina. Don't you think there's going to be a little bit of growing pains, a little bit of a getting used to process there in order for him to, for Carolina fans to see the best out of him? Of course, it's going to happen. It's expected. That's why you don't overreact around his play with game one. And the same thing goes for Jalen Withers. We'll talk about Lubin and Tyson later because I think they fall in a little bit of a different category, obviously, with it being their first game at Carolina. But Jalen Withers, he's a guy that hasn't started for Carolina before like that. He's now thrust into a role where some people were saying Tyson might start. Some people were saying Jalen Withers might start. He comes in the game, and I think he had a really good first half as a starter, again, finishing with 10 and 10. If he's given you that on a consistent basis, I don't think Carolina fans are going to be too worried about that. And I think he's overall going to be a big positive for this team if he's giving you those kind of numbers. So again, could have done some things better, needs to get to the free throw line more, maybe shoot it a little bit higher clip. He took some poor shots to start the second half, I thought, and did some things during Elon's run where you're like, I don't think he needed to be doing that. Slow it down and relax a little bit. But you could say the same thing about the whole team. So Withers, another guy in a new role, starting for North Carolina. There is adjustments that come with that. So no overreaction needed there. Again, it's just the first game. Now, Lubin and Tyson never played a game for Carolina before, a game that matters. I'm not talking about just a game, an exhibition game. There's a big difference between an exhibition game, I don't care who you're playing, and a game when it really matters and it counts at the end of the year. So Lubin and Tyson coming in, they're getting adjusted. They've never played at North Carolina before. They've never had that North Carolina written across your chest. It's a lot different playing at a Belmont and a Vanderbilt than it is playing at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I don't need to sit here and explain why. People watching this know because they're fans of the program. They understand the history of this thing. There is an adjustment period that comes with playing at North Carolina. So those guys, their numbers weren't great. K. Tyson hasn't really looked good, especially in some of the exhibition games as well. I know a lot of people are not sold on him, and I've seen people selling stock after one game, heck, after one exhibition. It's not necessary. Let it all play out. Let him and Lubin, I'm going to toss them in together here. Let them get adjusted. Let them get comfortable. There is a certain level of growing pains with them in particular because they're new faces on the team and with the program that comes with playing for North Carolina. So let that play out. There's no need to overreact about their play just yet. 10 games into the season, 12 games into the season, if we're having these same conversations, then sure, it becomes a problem and it becomes, okay, maybe these guys aren't quite what Carolina needed here, but I'm not. And you shouldn't be worried about it yet. There's no reason for that. Let it play out and let them get bedded in and let them get used to playing and preparing as a player at the University of North Carolina. Because like I said, it's a lot different than anything they've experienced before, and they're either going to sink or swim, and only time will tell. But you can't judge after one game. You can't do that. So that's the front court. I get some of the frustrations with the front court, some of the concerns about the front court. You've got essentially four guys there who haven't really ever been relied upon like they're going to be relied upon this year, particularly with Washington, I think, as the number one guy there. So there are going to be growing pains in that front court. There is going to be an adjustment period. I don't think anybody expected them just to hit the ground running, and Washington to have, 20 and 10 last night, and Withers to have 15 and 12, and Tyson to hit 4 threes and finish with 10 plus points and a few boards, and Lubin to do something similar, posting guys up and getting more boards. I mean, 7 rebounds, not bad for him. You'll take that. Want to see a little bit more on the point side for him, but he was 2 for 4. He was efficient. Can't be so mad at that. So let the front court develop because there's so many new faces and so many new guys. playing roles they just haven't really been asked to play or haven't been, are not used to playing yet. So again, 10 to 12 games in, if we're having a similar conversation, then it starts to become a problem. But right now, pump the brakes a little bit and let's see how this front court shakes out. And I want to transfer it onto the team as a whole, because I think there was a lot of overreaction with how the game got close in the second half. And I get it. I mean, it's the first game of the year. You're playing Elon, a team that, again, I think it has a lot of talent for the CAA, the conference they're in. And I think they may be able to do some nice things in that league. But for Carolina fans watching it, when you look at it very black and white, it's Elon. You shouldn't be struggling. You should be handling. You should be winning this game easily. It's not always how it works out. And when you look at this team, we talked about growing pains a lot. We talked about new faces a lot with the front court in particular. But let's look at the rest of the roster too. Let's look at the starting five, guys. We've already talked about two guys who have not started at all or very little games at North Carolina. So RJ Davis, Elliot Cadeau, they've started games. They get it. RJ Davis especially. He's been here forever, it feels like. He's kind of the new Armando Bake out here, but he's an absolutely fantastic player. He's a great guy to have. Seth Trimble. He hasn't been a guy that's been tasked to start for the Tar Heels. He's coming into a new role. Let's look at, let's not forget who Carolina's replacing. Just to name a few guys, you got Armando Bacot, you got Cormac Ryan, you got Harrison Ingram. These were guys that were integral to Carolina's ACC regular season championship and the run they had in the NCAA tournament as well, and a really positive season that they had. This is a very new look starting five. Seth Trimble's a guy that's not really been relied on to be a starter. He's not a guy that's been relied on super heavily to be an offensive weapon. It changes a little bit in this lineup. But you look at his stats, 30 minutes, 15 points, 6 for 12 from the floor, 3 assists, 2 rebounds, 3 for 4 from three-point land. That's a really good night from a guy like Seth Trimble, who is already the best defender on the team, but isn't a guy that until really the Memphis game, everybody kind of looked around and said, oh man, he does have a little bit more. He has a little bit deeper of an offensive bag than a lot of us thought. So I thought Seth Trimble played a good game last night. Now, second half, I thought he could have been better. I thought there was some things he, could have done better and, hit some shots and maybe some plays he'd like to have back as well. But first half, I thought he was really good. Second half, I think there's room for improvement. But again, he's a guy who's adjusting to being a starter in this role and a lineup that's a 3-guard lineup. It's a little bit different than what we saw from Carolina last year and what we've seen under Hubert Davis. Again, you had a little bit more height on the team last year with a guy like Ingram, with a guy like Cormac Ryan. You had a little bit more you could work with there. This is a smaller lineup with Cadeau, Trimble, and Davis. There's going to be some adjustments there. Even heck, throwing Withers in at the 4. Washington's not the tallest guy in the world. This is a small ball lineup, so expect some growing pains and expect some these guys to just not hit the ground running. I don't think that's something that people should be surprised about. Elliot Cadeau, I thought, had a really, solid game. He continues to kind of show, going back to some of the exhibition games as well, the development that he's had in his game as well. Then RJ Davis, like we talked about, we don't need to rehash that. Absolutely fantastic. And what allowed Carolina to get the win. Now, was RJ Davis having to take over against Elon a good thing? No. And again, that's another point of contention, of overreaction amongst Carolina fans, is why, I've seen this on Twitter everywhere, why is Carolina having to sub RJ in and kind of rely on him to take over this game when things get tight and when it looks like, Carolina, there's a chance Carolina loses this thing? I'll say it like this. We talked about a lot of it last year. Is it a recipe for success long-term? Absolutely not. There does not need to be against any opponent, much less an Elon, an over-reliance on RJ to come in and kind of, hey, RJ, like, it's getting a little sketchy out here, man. Come in and hit some shots and kind of take over this game so we can win it. You don't want to see that against opponents, especially like Elon. But man, is that a fantastic safety valve to have back there. There's a reason he's the, preseason ACC player of the year. There's a reason he's been an All-American. There's a reason he's a preseason All-American. He's a fantastic player for North Carolina. He's really, really good and he's fun to watch. So Carolina fans enjoy that, embrace that, and enjoy his last season watching him. But it's not a recipe for success long-term, but is a great thing to have in your bag. And he's going to win Carolina a lot of games this season, just like he did last night. So I see the overreaction. I see why fans are concerned with it, how it went down in that respect. Focus on the positive of it, though, that you have a guy like that can do it. You don't want to have to be doing that against Elon, but still, you had a guy who came in, who took over the game with ease, didn't even really look like he got out of second gear last night, and again, was absolutely fantastic down the stretch. So don't want to be seeing that a lot. If it happens at Kansas, that's one thing. But if it happens, against Hawaii in a couple of weeks, we're having a little bit different of a conversation. So RJ Davis, fantastic. Great guy to have there. I get the overreaction with him having to take over, but again, pump the brakes. It's game one. Carolina got the win. Now, last thing I really want to harp on, well, last two things. I want to talk about the freshmen. Same conversation. These are two guys in Ian Jackson and Drake Powell that are playing their first competitive game when it matters at the University of North Carolina. I don't care how highly rated they are. I do not care. I do not care how many stars they had or what their stats were in high school. One of my favorite podcasts to listen to is Run Your Race, the podcast that Theo Pinson does. And he talks and interviews, former NBA players, former Carolina players, coaches, all that kind of stuff. And one of his favorite questions to ask is, what was your welcome to college moment? And he asked that because he experienced that. This is a guy that won a national title in North Carolina. He's talked to guys that are NBA All-Stars that had welcome to college moments. It's a different animal going from high school to college. And if you expect these guys to just hit the ground running and just, drop, double-digit points and, grab a ton of rebounds, hit some assists, do some crazy dunks and stuff like that, that's not how it works. It's not going to happen. And that's okay. There's no reason to worry about that. Drake Powell and Ian Jackson, 10 combined points, 5 each. Powell was 2 for 8 from the floor. Ian Jackson was 2 for 7 for the floor. It's not great, but they're true freshmen. They're getting used to this, again, North Carolina written across your chest. Not only that, the expectations, the pressure that comes with that, but just playing at the college level, it's so different than anything they've experienced before. So there's going to be an adjustment period with those guys as well, and that's okay. Let it play out, and let's see how these guys develop. Now, we've kind of gone through the whole, all the guys that played last night. I want to run through it one more time just to illustrate, I think, the main point that I'm trying to make here before we head on out. Ian Jackson, true freshman. Drake Powell, true freshman. Kay Tyson, transfer, never played at Carolina before. Vin Allen Lubin, transfer, never played at Carolina before. Jalen Washington, guy that's in a different role right now. A lot of talent. Think he's going to do really well this season, but he's in a new role. Jalen Withers, in a lot of ways, in a new role as well, kind of thrown into the starting lineup. Is he going to be the starter for the rest of the season? We'll see, but a different role from him. I think we had a positive performance from him last night. I think that's what we saw. Elliot Cadeau, normal kind of thing for him. Started a lot of games for North Carolina last year. He's grown a lot. He's going to continue to grow. He's a really, really good player for North Carolina. No concerns there for me. Seth Trimble, his game has evolved a ton. He's fun to watch. He's going to be integral to this team's success this year. When Carolina gets out in transition with RJ and Trimble and Cadeau especially, it's almost impossible to guard them. You can't just stop one because the other's so athletic and can get to the rack and finish. He's going to have a really good year for Carolina. I don't see any reason to be worried about him. RJ Davis, do I even have to sit here and say that there's no reason to be worried about RJ Davis, especially after what we saw last night? So there are guys adjusting to new roles. There are guys adjusting to playing at North Carolina. There are guys that have never played college basketball before that played a lot of minutes last night. There was always going to be growing pains with this team, guys. There's a lot of new faces. And again, we can revisit this conversation in 10 games. Maybe we will. And if these problems are occurring, Carolina's lost more games than they should have, and you're not seeing the production out of Washington, you're not seeing maybe the production out of the Withers and Tyson and Lubin and the freshmen, you're not seeing the evolution there, then there's reasons to be concerned. But after one game, a 9 p.m. tip-off in Chapel Hill against Elon, a team that Carolina should be beating easily, I'll give you that. There was always going to be growing pains with this team, and it really shouldn't be that big of a surprise, in my opinion, that last night was a bit of a struggle. And let's give some credit to Elon, too. I thought Elon looked really good. Carolina definitely could have played better defensively, no doubt about it. But let's not act like Elon wasn't hitting a lot of contested shots and tough looks that they're probably not going to hit as the season goes on. They're also in their first game, too. And they're playing in Chapel Hill, an opportunity, in-state school, right down the road, an opportunity for a lot of these guys to say, hey, chip on my shoulder. I wasn't ever looked at by programs like this. I'm going to go perform on a big stage. I mean, you talk about just a massive, massive opportunity for those guys as well. So we can't just overlook Elon. I know, again, Carolina should be beating Elon easily. I'm never going to say that. But you can't just overlook that and act like, oh, they're just playing, the school of the blind down the road. No, this is a solid basketball team with a lot of talent. And I think that's going to do well in the CAA and had a lot to play for. First game of the year, nothing really to lose going to North Carolina. The chip on the shoulder mentality that a lot of them took because of them being overlooked and ending up at a school like Elon compared to an ACC school, much less a blue blood like North Carolina in your own state. we have to give a lot of credit to them as well. And I thought they performed really, really well. Again, Carolina could have stopped that a little bit better, but you can't just overlook that. So, guys, I'll end this with this. There are reasons to be concerned. I'm not saying that. There always is with any team. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's an 09 national championship team. There are always positives and negatives of every game you can take away, and then we'll have to watch how they evolve going into the rest of the season. But it's the first game of the year. It's November 4th. Let's see how things play out. I don't get why there's this massive overreaction on social media. There was always going to be growing pains with this team. I just spent 20 minutes going through why there's going to be growing pains with this team, why there's a lot of new faces that are getting used to stuff, and why there's going to be an evolution and a bit of a progression and journey with these guys. They're not the finished product yet. They're still getting used to what they're being asked to do. They're still getting used to playing with new teammates. We haven't even hit on that. We talked about all these new guys coming in, new guys playing different roles. This is a team that's playing its first competitive game together, much less with what? 4 guys that have never played with any of these guys in a competitive game before. There was always going to be growing pains with this team, and they're going to continue. And there's a very real chance Carolina goes to Kansas and struggles and loses that game. I mean, it's more likely Carolina goes and loses to Kansas on Friday than it is they go there and win. That's just the fact of the matter, the situation at hand. But even if that happens, don't overreact. Let's watch and let's see how this team develops, so we can have the same conversation in 10, 12 games when we have a little bit better idea of what this team not only has, but what only this team is made of. Last thing I'll say, do you want this team to be playing its best basketball in the first game of the season on November 4th? I don't think you do, and Carolina fans know exactly why. I've been Jacob Turner. Another edition of our, I was about to say 3 things, man. I'm so used to saying that nowadays. Our Daily Drop podcast series. I appreciate you watching. Stop overreacting. Stop tripping. It's been one game. A lot of season left. A lot of development left. A lot of tougher games left. A lot of very winnable games left as well. Let's see how this team evolves, and let's see what this team can do. But stop overreacting after 1, 2, 3 games. It's a journey. It's a process. There's the P word, AJ. I love that. And it's going to take some time. Going to take some time for things to shake out and develop. But that's what you expect on a team and with a team that has a lot of new faces and a lot of guys being asked to do things they just haven't really done before. Like the video if you agree. Like the video if you haven't been overreacting. Heck, like the video if you have been overreacting a little bit. That's fine. I get it. I'm a massive fan of Manchester United. I overreact all the time. We win a game with the best team in the world. We lose a game and I'm ready to jump off a cliff. I completely get it. We've lost a lot of games this year. We're absolutely horrendous. Could be worse. I get it, guys. But let's see how this thing plays out. Appreciate you watching. Make sure you like, make sure you share, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell too. We'll see y'all later this week, as I obviously will have plenty more content coming. Thanks, guys.